What happened to me during the wildfire that scorched the West in the summer of 2018 altered everything I believed about the natural world and what might still dwell within it. This is my story about survival, fear, and the most impossible friendship I could have ever imagined. Most people think the biggest threat during a wildfire is the flames themselves, but let me tell you something that will sound absolutely insane. The real story is what the fire forced out of hiding. This is the story of how a giant Bigfoot saved my life and how I maybe saved his too. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. But every word of what follows is the truth, or as close to truth as I can manage when trying to describe something that should not exist. I worked as a patrol officer in Northern California for about 7 years before this happened. The valley where I was stationed was one of those places that barely shows up on maps, tucked between mountain ranges with maybe 3,000 residents scattered across the whole area. We had one main road running through town, a gas station that doubled as a grocery store, and more trees than you could count in a lifetime. Beautiful country, the kind of place people move to when they want to get away from civilization. Towering pines, crystal clear streams, mountain peaks that turned purple at sunset. But when fire season rolled around, everyone got nervous. The beauty of all those trees turned into a threat. Thousands of acres of fuel just waiting for a spark. The summer of 2018 was brutal. By August, the whole state felt like a tinderbox waiting for a match. We had gone months without rain, and every morning I would check the wind direction out of habit, knowing that one lightning strike could turn our quiet valley into an inferno. The grass was brown and crisp, crunching under your boots like breaking glass. The trees looked stressed, their needles dull instead of vibrant green. Old-timers in town kept saying it reminded them of the big fires from decades past, the ones that wiped entire communities off the map. Nobody wanted to believe it could happen to us, but deep down, we all knew we were living on borrowed time. When the call came through dispatch on August 17th that a fire had started about 15 miles west of us, my stomach dropped. The wind was blowing east, straight toward our valley. I was at the station filling out paperwork when the alert came through, and I remember looking out the window at the clear blue sky and thinking how deceptive it was. How calm everything seemed when disaster was already in motion. Within an hour, we could see the smoke on the horizon. Just a thin gray line at first, but growing thicker by the minute. By noon, it looked like a wall, dark and ominous, blocking out half the sky. The fire spread faster than anyone predicted. Within 6 hours, the evacuation order came down for the entire Eastern Valley. Every available officer, every volunteer, every firefighter was mobilized. The emergency sirens went off, that eerie wailing sound that makes your blood run cold even when you're expecting it. I had been on duty for maybe 3 hours when my sergeant told me to start going door to door on the outer edges, making sure everyone was getting out. The smoke was already visible on the horizon, a massive gray wall swallowing the sky. I remember thinking how small it seemed from a distance, like a storm cloud you could outrun. But fires are not like storms. They do not follow predictable paths, and when the wind is behind them, they move with a speed that defies logic. I took the north route toward the foothills, where houses were spread far apart and connected by dirt roads winding through the pines. Most folks had already left, but there were always a few who waited until the last possible second, either stubborn, scared, or both. Some people couldn't accept that they had to leave everything behind. I checked maybe a dozen properties that afternoon, each emptier than the last. Open doors, empty driveways, lights still on inside, televisions flickering in abandoned living rooms, coffee pots still warm on counters. It was eerie, like walking through a town frozen in the middle of daily life. The wind picked up, sending ash swirling through the air like gray snow. Each gust carried the sharp, acrid smell of burning pine mixed with something worse, burned plastic, or melting rubber. The sky turned apocalyptic, orange at the horizon, sickly yellow overhead. The sun a dull red circle struggling through the smoke. Birds fled east in panicked flocks. Deer ran through yards, their fear of humans forgotten. My radio crackled constantly. The fire had jumped containment lines, spread in multiple directions. Emergency crews were being pulled back. Helicopters grounded by smoke. A worst-case scenario. And I was driving toward it. Around evening, the light changed. Everything took on an orange tint, like the world filtered through amber glass. I pulled up to the last house on my route. A small, aging place with peeling blue paint and a sagging porch. I could see someone moving inside. An older woman answered the door, panicked and shaking. Her dog had bolted when she tried to pack. She refused to leave without him. He was all she had left. I promised I'd find him. She drove away in tears, and I was left alone with the fire closing fast. I searched the property until I heard barking from the tree line. Against protocol, I followed it into the forest. The fire roared like a jet engine. Smoke choked the air, and then I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, not animal, not human. Through the smoke, I saw a figure, too tall, too broad, moving calmly toward the fire. I yelled, it paused, then kept walking. That's when I knew something was wrong. I followed. The tracks were enormous, clearly not human. 5 toes, massive stride, no bear. I was following a Bigfoot, and it was heading straight into the wildfire. Everything after that, running through fire, being led to water, hiding in a cave, surviving multiple fire fronts, should have killed me. It didn't, because he protected me, guided me, saved me. When we finally reached a road at dawn, he stopped at the tree line. He wouldn't step out. He had done all he could. We shared a final moment, hand to hand, and then he disappeared back into the forest. I never told anyone. I still haven't. The fire destroyed over 100,000 acres. My patrol car melted. I spent days in the hospital. The woman got her dog back. And somewhere out there, a Bigfoot who saved my life is still alive. That's the truth. Believe it or not.
The owners of the survivor's gift shop sought to commemorate this legend by erecting an original Bigfoot statue in the mid-1980s. That initial version, slightly smaller than the current structure and crafted from combustible materials, met a tragic end when vandals set it ablaze in the mid-1990s, underscoring the statue's vulnerability despite its symbolic resilience. Standing an impressive 28 feet tall, this concrete behemoth boasts intricately detailed fur and a whimsical, folklorish grin. Families are invited to gather around its massive legs for photographs, adding a playful element to the somber history.
Skeptics might argue this is a person in a dark outfit, possibly a hunter or hiker, but there are counterpoints to that. Second, there's no visible gear, backpack, or headwear that you'd expect on a person trekking in such cold conditions. Overall, this frame feels less like a hoax and more like a genuine capture of something out of the ordinary, whether it's an unknown animal, a local legend in the flesh, or something we haven't classified yet. A chilling new trail camera video has recently gone viral after being posted on TikTok by the user Dead Cinema on June 9th, 2025. Allegedly filmed in Alaska, the clip is causing a stir on watch as this elusive creature stares directly at the camera, raising more questions than it answers. Though the exact filming location remains unknown, it's said to have been captured deep in a forested area. There are areas, particularly around the thighs and rump, where the hair is patchy or missing. This could suggest mange, seasonal shedding, or even age-related fur loss, a trait more commonly observed in known mammals, particularly bears. However, what stands out is the creature's posture. It's walking on all fours, but the limb structure and length, especially of the back legs, give it an oddly humanoid proportion. The spine is relatively flat, not arched like that of most quadrupeds, and the leg extension looks longer than what you'd expect from a typical black bear.
Footprints, giant barefoot prints in the soft dirt by the porch, easily twice the size of my boots, perfectly shaped, 5 toes, human-like but not. Too long, too wide, too deep. Something had circled the cabin, stopped by the bedroom window, stood there, watching. I followed the prints until they vanished into rocky ground. My hands were shaking. I couldn't explain it. Not a bear, not a person, something else. I didn't leave the cabin that day. First, you need to understand how I ended up in that cabin alone. How I came face to face with whatever that thing was, trying to tear its way through the wall. Because if I just showed you the clip with no context, you'd assume it was fake. Hell, even with context, some people will say that. But I'm going to tell you exactly what happened from the start, and you can make up your own mind. I'm a single dad. Been that way for about 4 years now.
High in the Montana mountains, not far from Yellowstone, there's a forgotten place few people even know exists. The only road that once led to it collapsed long ago, claimed by weather, erosion, and time. Reaching the location now isn't a matter of simple hiking. It requires steady hands, careful footing, and enough climbing experience to navigate exposed rock faces. Even then, it can only be attempted during a brief window each year, when the snow finally retreats and the ground dries under the short-lived warmth of summer. My grandfather mentioned the place only once. His memory was vague, stripped of detail by the passage of time. He was never one to embellish stories, and when his recollection faltered, he didn't try to fill in the gaps. What remained was something he'd heard as a boy, a rumor passed down through older generations. There had been a silver mine hidden high in the mountains, and something else, something that lived in the forest around it. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. Whatever it was, it refused to share the land with the miners or the small settlement built to support them. The town didn't last long. Violence followed. Those who survived abandoned the place entirely, leaving it to rot in the wilderness. No one ever went back. Last summer, Taylor and I spent a week hiking and camping inside Yellowstone National Park. We had perfect weather, no signal, no obligations. We went completely off-grid and loved every minute of it. On our final night, we sat beside a low fire while the stars slowly turned around the North Star. As the flames died down, I told Taylor about my grandfather's story. She listened quietly, taking it in. When I finished, she smiled and said that was where we should go next. Winter dragged on, made tolerable only by the promise of what came after it. But it was summer that held my attention. A long break from school, a full week in the mountains, a rare chance to do exactly what we wanted. When the warmth finally arrived, it brought an unrestrained excitement with it. The waiting was almost over. We drove as far as the road would allow, winding upward between mountains stripped of winter's white caps and painted instead with green, blue, and brown. Taylor pulled the car onto the shoulder of a lonely dirt track. The mountain air was sharp, cool enough to cut the heat of the sun. We shouldered our packs and began the climb. As far as we knew, there wasn't much left to find. A ranger had marked the general area on a map, though none of them had ever gone up there themselves. The location had been passed down through stories alone. When I told my grandfather about our plan, he smiled. Then his expression shifted. He told me to be careful. I told him not to worry. The higher we climbed, the thinner the spruce trees became. We scrambled along a rocky shoulder while Taylor checked the map. If everything went our way, we would reach the site by sunset. It didn't. A sheer rock face forced us into a long detour that cost us hours. We decided to wait until morning. We camped in a clearing with a distant view of where the town should be. The trees below clustered tightly together, as if bracing against the night, obscuring the exact location on the map. I wondered what we'd find. There was a good chance nothing remained. Maybe a few stumps where buildings once stood. Maybe less than that. We turned our attention to the sky instead. We watched for shooting stars and agreed it didn't really matter. Taylor woke me in the middle of the night. The half-moon hung low over the mountains, casting pale light across the land. Her whisper came out rushed, broken. She said she'd heard something. A sharp crack, loud, like a thick branch snapping cleanly in two. Then she pointed. Near the horizon, a faint yellow light flickered. It looked like a candle burning in a window, except there were no windows, and no one to light a candle. I offered explanations that didn't convince either of us. A strange reflection, distant campers, some atmospheric trick. Whatever it was, it sat directly in the direction we planned to travel. Eventually, exhaustion pulled us back into sleep. We barely spoke in the morning as we continued toward the site. I was eager to uncover a mundane explanation for what we'd seen. A campfire, a lone hermit, anything ordinary. Taylor kept her eyes fixed on the trees ahead. I knew she was thinking the same thing. The forest thickened. Branches scraped at our legs as the ground rose and fell unpredictably. I followed the terrain without thinking until my boot struck something solid. I looked down and jumped back. A wooden stake protruded from the earth, cracked near the top. More appeared beyond it. Crosses. Dozens of them. They were scattered through a clearing, rough and handmade. Some had rotted almost completely. Others were preserved just enough to read. I called out to Taylor, my voice thin and distant. We moved carefully between them. In the far corner, 6 stood together, all marked with the same date, December 7th, 1891. Disease, Taylor said quietly. Cholera, maybe. Beyond the cemetery, the trees thinned again. We crested a rise and saw the remains of the town spread across a hard plateau. A few buildings still stood, warped and gray. Others had collapsed into skeletal frames. Above them, rusted mining equipment clung to the mountainside. Taylor pushed open the door of the nearest house. It tore free from its hinges and fell into the dirt. Inside, pine needles covered the floor. I lingered outside. That's when I saw the grooves. Deep, parallel marks carved into the siding. Weathered, but unmistakable. I ran my fingers along them and wondered what kind of hand could have made them. We explored what remained. Tables, chairs, bed frames left behind in the rush to flee. Nothing of value, nothing comforting. As the sun dipped toward the peaks, we decided to stay. The first sign of trouble came when I found my windbreaker lying on the ground. I knew it had been packed deep inside my bag. Our gear was scattered, sleeping bags pulled free, the stove overturned, my backpack torn by 2 long parallel slashes. This was no animal we knew. We found a single footprint pressed into the soil. Whatever had entered our camp had done so on 2 legs, and the feet beneath those legs were enormous. Night came fast. We moved inside one of the buildings and didn't light a fire. Clouds rolled in. Rain followed. Thunder echoed through the valley. Then the growl came. Low. Deep. The door burst open. And in the lightning, we saw it. Not a bear. Not anything human. The door splintered. I dropped the bear spray. Taylor screamed. I sprayed blindly. The creature howled. When morning finally came, the rain had washed away most of the footprints, but not all of them. As we began our descent, I looked back. On the hill where the town and cemetery stood, a lone yellow light burned. Not a welcome, a warning.